Hello, everybody, and welcome to another episode of your Bish Therapist podcast. I am Melissa Reich, your Bish Therapist. Today's episode, it's going to be a long one and it's going to be very involved. So today I'm covering two major events that have happened, in the Bravoverse this week. One is I'm going to cover the episode of Everybody Loves Tom with Dr. Drew with the so-called narcissism test. I did so much homework on this. It was sincerely like I was back in graduate school. I read Dr. Drew's study. I took the test. I printed the test. I took the test different ways to see if I could get different answers. So I not only have the information about the video, the podcast, because I did watch that too. Although I will fully admit I couldn't get through the whole thing. I found it just incredibly frustrating for a couple of reasons. So I think it was about an hour long, and I think I hung in there for about 50 minutes. But I got the important stuff that I needed to see, the interaction between Dr. Drew and Tom Sandoval, and even Tom Schwartz, which he kind of did what he always does, which is just be there, not interject anything particularly super helpful. But so I have today, I'm going to talk all things Everybody Loves Tom. I'm going to talk about the NPI, which is the Narcissism Personality Inventory. And I am also going to talk about the Real Housewives of Beverly Hills, specifically Erika Jayne Empathy Gate. Everybody who knows me by now, who listens to this podcast, who watches it on YouTube, you know that I love a therapist and a show. I love watching it. I probably watched that scene about 10 times. I found it so fascinating, and I have so much to say on it. Not just Erika, but also the stuff going on between Kyle and Mauricio. There's just been so much happening. So buckle in, because today is definitely going to be a long episode, chock full of information. But before I get started with that, I do want to touch on the fact that over the weekend, we found out that Matthew Perry passed away suddenly. The reports were that he drowned, but that is incorrect. He was found in his home, and I do not have any more details, but I just want to fix that narrative. He did not accidentally drown. The reason that I wanted to talk about this a little bit today is because, Matthew Perry, he was beloved by so many people, but for me, Maddie was a friend. I'm going to try to get through this without crying, but, and I'm going to explain. So for people who didn't listen to, I have an episode called The One Where Your Bish Therapist Tells Her Story. In that episode, I can't remember which episode it is, but in that episode, I talk about meeting the cast of Friends. And so today, what I want to do, just to honor my friend Matt, is to tell the story because, Matt didn't really want to be known. He wrote a book, he wrote a memoir and he didn't really want to be known for just Friends because he has done so much. And so my way of honoring him today is to just briefly tell the story and just to honor him by sharing his experience, strength, and hope, because that was really important to him. So when I was 17, if this was in 1998, yes, it was in the 1900s, I developed ovarian cancer. And by the time that they found it, it was end stage. And as a result of that, I don't know how my parents finagled this, but I was able to make a wish through the Make-A-Wish Foundation. And my wish was to meet the cast of Friends, because at the time when I was going through chemotherapy and surgeries and all these things, Friends was my comfort show, sincerely. I watched it just on a continuous loop, made me really happy, made me laugh, made me forget about things that I was dealing with. And so the opportunity for me to be able to meet these people, it was just such a blessing. Honestly, I always say it was the best thing about having cancer. it was just getting to make a wish and being able to do that. It was just the most amazing experience of my life. So I met them on 8/25/99. So flash forward to it's 8/25/99. I am in the audience. I am there to watch a taping. So my Make-A-Wish wranglers were there were certain things you could do and certain things you couldn't do, because let's not forget, I was there during the height of fame of Friends. It was like the Beatles. It was seriously like you were seeing these people who were larger than life and were so popular. It was the most wild experience. So I was only supposed to go to see a taping, or I'm sorry, to just watch the rehearsal and then to meet the cast of Friends, which I did. And they were and everyone has been asking this, so I will tell you, the episode that I am in eventually is season 6, episode 3, the one with Ross's denial. It aired. So I'm watching them rehearse this, and then I meet the cast. And, everyone was fine except, Lisa Kudrow was not really nice, and she didn't really talk to me, and she was just very dismissive, which was a bummer. But, who knows? Maybe she was tired, having a bad day. As an adult, I understand how it works. No shade, but it was just disappointing. But when I met Matthew Perry and David Schwimmer, it's hard to explain. So for those, who don't know, I was diagnosed with an end-stage ovarian cancer, and the day after my 18th birthday, my doctors told me I was in remission, which was a surprise to literally everybody. I mean, I had doctors tell my parents that I shouldn't even get treated. They should just put me in hospice. So for me, surviving was miraculous, but also I was just so traumatized. I was like, I'm 17 years old going through this, then I'm 18 and I'm surviving, and somehow no one understands it, and I'm meeting the cast of Friends. My point is that when I met Matt, my trauma was it was so palpable, but I wasn't able to recognize it. And for me, the people that were around me, I felt really alone because they didn't seem to be recognizing it either. Nobody, not my medical practitioners, not my family, not my friends. I mean, I just felt like on an island that nobody saw me. And I'm telling you, when I met Matthew Perry, he saw me. Matt is the type of person who I believe that he has hurt so badly that he treats everybody with such love and support and respect, because he never wanted people to feel the way that he has felt. And I remember, I was 18, I was young, but I remember that. And not only do I remember, I continued to hold that feeling here it sounds like an insane thing to say, that the first person who ever saw me was Matthew Perry, but I swear to you, that is the truth. So what Matt did was, not only did he see me, and he really engaged with me when I told him that I was there for the taping, or the rehearsal. He said, "No, that's not good enough." Literally, that's what he said. And he and David Schwimmer, they went to their producers, and not only did I get to stay for the taping and sit in the front row, they put me in as an extra. What? And so the thing is, I have posted pictures of this on my Instagram before. I wasn't able to take pictures with the cast. And that was just like a rule. I'm sure that had nothing to do with them. But I do have some pictures on like a chair that said Friends and things like that. I have like little baby fuzz hair because my hair had just started growing back. And, here I am on the set of Central Perk. And again, it was season 6, episode 3, the one with Ross's denial. So the scene that I was in was where Ross and Phoebe are in Central Perk. So I got to sit in Central Perk. And, they're talking about Ross's secret love for Rachel, blah, blah, blah. But after the scene, both Matthew Perry and David Schwimmer gave me hugs and thumbs up. Like, they treated me like like I was somebody. And it just stayed with me all these years. And so the reason I share this story, you know, Matt didn't just want to be known for Friends, because my God, he was so much more than that. He was a brilliant actor. But most importantly, he was so important to the sober community, because Matt, his 2022 memoir is called Friends, Lovers, and the Big Terrible Thing. And he talked about his journeys to get sober. He spent about $9 million to get sober, went to 15 rehabs. In 2018, he was in a coma. His colon burst due to addiction. And so he worked so hard to get sober. And once he did, he turned his Malibu home into a sober living called Perry House. That man did the work. He walked the walk, he talked the talk, and he did the work for people in addiction and recovery. And that is the legacy that he wanted. He wanted people to remember his legacy of helping others, of seeing others. His greatest pride was seeing somebody who is struggling and being able to say, I can actually help you with that, because he turned his home into a treatment center. He had connections to be able to get people into sobriety that wanted it and were ready for it. He was there. He was a man who didn't just talk. He found it so immensely fulfilling to sincerely see people and help them, because I believe he never felt like he was seen. And so for me, the grief that I feel right now honestly did take me by surprise. I just did an episode about complicated grief, and apparently I didn't even listen to it myself. But I felt when I heard that he passed away, I felt sincerely gutted. I felt like I had lost a friend. And I know that's how millions of people feel. But the thing for me that's really sad is that over the years, I knew how much Matt would appreciate knowing what he did for me. Like I wanted to tell him that, how special he was to me. And through the years, I tried to reach out to him and David Schwimmer, and to no avail. I just was never able to reach out to anyone. I tried emailing, DMing. And the thing for me that felt so sad when I found out Matt had died is it made me feel like I'll never get to tell him, which made me really sad. And all I can say now is I hope he knows. I hope he's at peace and rest, and I hope that he knows all that he did for people, because he truly was a very special person. And in fact, you know I was young, but as I've grown up, I've never met anyone like him. I've never come across someone who can be so genuinely generous of spirit in such a brief interaction. I just need people to understand how special he truly was, to have a brief interaction with somebody and to make them feel truly seen is such a gift. And I feel angry that he got sober and he worked so hard, and I just feel like he had so much more work to do and so much more experience, strength, and hope to share with us all. But all I can say is that I'm grateful that he was sober and he got time to experience that, and he got to experience truly helping people. I'm just really grateful for that. So before I start blubbering, I just want to take a moment to just honor Matt. And, all we can do, for me, all I can do is live every day like Matt did, and to treat people like they're special and important and they're seen, and, just continue to do the work that I do to help people as well. So thank you, Maddie, for teaching me that. Oh, getting all misty. Okay. So let's move on before I start blubbering to Everybody Loves Tom. I'm going to do that first, and then I'm going to go ahead and talk about Real Housewives of Beverly Hills. So with the Everybody Loves Tom stuff, there is so much information. So where I'm going to start is that the episode went like this. Excuse me. Tom and Dr. Drew, they kind of like just shot the shit a little bit at the beginning. But Dr. Drew asked some questions about like Tom's origin story, which to me, I am always fascinated by people's origin story because I think, we all are flawed. All humans are flawed, and we all have an origin story that explains why we are the way we are. So I did find a couple of nuggets in that. We're also going to talk about this test that Dr. Drew administered to Tom, which to me was a little bit ridiculous. It's called the Narcissistic Personality Inventory, as I had mentioned. It is a forced choice test, which means it's one or it's two. You get two choices. And there are 40 questions. Okay. Now, Dr. Drew, here's the thing. It kind of was like a footnote. Like you had to listen really clear to know that this test is not used for any sort of diagnosis. And I will argue that I think this test is partially junk science. And I will explain why. But so the purpose of this test, to be clear, is to show narcissistic personality traits, no diagnosis. Okay, so that is really imperative to know, because the thing that really activated me about all this is that, the average person, when they hear, oh, he took a narcissistic personality inventory and he scored really low, so he must not be narcissistic. And it's like, well, that's not actually true. And here's the thing, to be clear, I'm not here to say anyone is a narcissist. We all know I don't diagnose. He's not my client. But I am here to just shine a light on some of the holes in all of this that Dr. Drew and Tom are furiously trying to just like pretend don't exist with this whole test thing. So fun fact, in graduate school, I took a lot of courses in clinical assessment because I always knew that I wanted to be a therapist, but I am such a psychology nerd that the testing piece of it was so fascinating to me. I did actually think about going into that, but then I was like, no, I just want to deal with people. I wanted to do what Matt did, right? I wanted to see people, to validate people, to be present for people, and to help people. And the way that I felt I could best do that was by being a therapist. So I didn't end up doing the testing. But the point is that I remember, doing these testing classes like it was yesterday. Now, was it long ago? Sure, because I'm going to be 43. And, this was in grad school, so I'm sure things have changed. But I learned a lot about clinical assessment tools that I just feel like it'd be interesting for you all to know, so you can kind of really think about this quote unquote test. So first, let me talk about Tom's origin story. I'm going to talk about a couple of interesting things that I found in that, and then I'm going to go ahead and talk about the test itself. And I apologize if I'm sniffling a little bit or clearing my throat, but I've been teary all weekend and I'm getting a little bit of a cold. So please forgive. So Tom grew up in St. Louis with an older brother and his two biological parents until they divorced at age 7. And what I found was interesting is that, when Dr. Drew asked Tom about this, he said that the divorce was bleak, and it was an interesting choice of words. And Dr. Drew did say, wow, bleak, that's an interesting way to describe it, for a 7-year-old. So, the one thing that really, here's a couple of things that I wrote down that really fascinated me from that interview. So apparently the Sandoval family, they were supposed to live in like this nice house in a nice suburb, according to Tom. And after his parents separated, his dad moved into the big house alone, and then his mom moved into like a tiny apartment. And I found that really interesting because when parents separate and the kids are going back and forth, or they're living primarily with the mother, and the father like takes like the big house or whatever. And it tells me a little bit maybe about his dad. And it also is super fascinating that like now Tom is refusing to leave the house with Ariana, and like they're still living together for all this time. It really is, it's there's a little bit of generational trauma. There's a little bit of like his dad's personality, maybe that rubbed off on Tom. Like, it certainly isn't a chivalrous thing to do. I'm just going to say that. I mean, did he, do men have to do that? To give, the house to the female or the person who's raising the kids, if we're talking about gay couples or what have you. It's not about the gender, it's about the belief that, well, I'm gonna punish you. That's how it felt to me, like very punishing. And so Tom did say that I guess his mom cheated at the end of the relationship, which led his dad to be like obsessive and insecure. And so it was interesting because I think there's just so much there that I could interpret. And so maybe also that leads to the reason why mom had her own apartment, because she just didn't want to deal with that. I don't know. I just think it's an interesting model for Tom. And I think it does explain a little bit. So he said that in 4th grade, he gained some weight. He had trouble staying awake in class, which Dr. Drew was quick to say was depression. Dr. Drew, I noticed he definitely loves to, he likes to put a good label on things. And, who knows if 4th grade Tom had depression. And, certainly in kids, depression expresses itself differently. So apparently Tom had depression in 4th grade. And then he told this story about he went to space camp and he met his first love, and her name was Megan, which I just found so funny that Tom met his first love at space camp. Like, he does have this dichotomy about him where it's like he wants to be so cool, but I feel like he inherently is so dorky. And if he just owned that, I think that would be cool in and of itself. But, and that's his choice, I guess. So he met this girl who was the love of his life. He claimed her name was Megan. She helped him come out of his shell and get his mojo back, which was a pivotal moment. So after meeting her and going to the space camp, it allowed him to be social and changed how he acted in 8th grade. So he became really popular. He was like, everybody loved him. And so this is the part that I find really interesting, is that he says the popularity got to his head. Sound familiar? And that he became only interested in very popular girls. Does that sound familiar? And in 9th grade, he became literally hated for his behaviors because he was such a cocky shit. Sound familiar? And basically everybody hated him. And it was only after this that he realized to have friends, he needed to be nice and less cocky. Sound familiar? I just feel like what he explained as I'm watching this is literally what we're seeing now, except the difference is he's 40 and he's no longer in 9th grade. And, it's funny. I find it funny that Dr. Drew didn't talk about this or identified it all, because it is eerily similar. And for me, the most fascinating part about this whole story is that, like, Tom didn't just change because he wanted to. He changed because people were mad at him. That is a huge, important part of this story. So is he now, with this whole Sandoval thing and everybody loves Tom, and is he just acting nice to garner favor and to get people back on his side like he did on 9th grade? Here's the thing. Do we all act like little shits when we're young? Certainly. Have I done things I'm not proud of and acted not right? Sure, absolutely. But it just is too parallel to what we're seeing now for my therapist brain is like, it's buzzing a little bit. So it tells me that there's something going on here. And here's why this is also important. Because when I explained to you about the test score, I cannot wait to hear what you all think about this. So first of all, the test that I'm talking about, you can go right now and type it in your browser, and you can go ahead and take the test. It's online, and I encourage everyone to do it just for the sake of, seeing what it's all about. It's 0, so a 0, not an O. So 0eb.com. Just type that in and click enter, and it'll take you right to Dr. Drew's. This is what it'll look like. I did write on it a little bit, but for those of you who are watching on video, this is what it looks like. It says, how narcissistic are you? And then it says, this is the exact test used by Dr. Drew to gauge the narcissism level of hundreds of celebrities. Okay, so you can go and check that out. And also, I do need to give a shout out to my girl, Lindsay. She is on Instagram, VanderPod Recaps on Instagram. She is, a fellow content creator. And she is the one who drew my attention to the test and to Dr. Drew's research article. I was looking for it, and she found it and she sent it to me. So Lindsay, thank you. And also what she does is amazing. She writes down all the recaps of all these podcasts, so we don't have to watch them and we can just look at the transcript. Doing the Lord's work. Thank you, Lindsay. Go follow her, Vander Pod Recaps. So the thing that is so wild to me is that this narcissism test, okay, the scores, there's a low score that you can get of, wait, let me look here. Okay, so the maximum score that you can get is 40. The average American is 15. And the lowest score, because I tried a couple different experiments with it, the lowest score that I could get was a 2. Which was really interesting because I took the test a couple times. So I took the test genuinely, like answering it just to see for me what that looked like. And I got a score of a 15. Keep this in mind, okay? So the average American is a 15, and I scored a 15 as well, right? Maximum is 40. Tom Sandoval scored a 7. Really? You're telling me that Tom Sandoval scored a 7 on the test? Okay, so 7 is essentially like very few narcissistic traits and tendencies. And I'm sorry, but here's why I'm just not buying that. Because anybody who watched the episode, his behaviors are in stark contrast to the stuff that comes out of his mouth, okay? So here's the thing about these tests. These self-assessment tests are based on your perception being your reality. So Tom answered the questions based on his perspective of himself, which sincerely can't be trusted, in my opinion. And number 2, the test is highly susceptible to malingering, which is a fancy word for faking. And I'm going to tell you why. So I'm going to use, there's a really good personality assessment called the MMPI, the Minnesota Multiphasic Personality Inventory. And in grad school, that was one of the tests that we had to take and we had to score. And so I'm most familiar with it. Okay. So the MMPI, here's what's important about this test and other tests that are actually valid. The MMPI has several approaches within the test to prevent or detect faking. So it can either prevent it, or if people are savvy enough to, fake these things, which is why you have to have these constructs built in. And so what in the MMPI, there's trends you can see if people are trying to fake or malinger, that is kind of like an easy tell that they're doing that. The other thing that the MMPI, and true clinical assessment tools have that this NPI certainly doesn't is social desirability and validity scales are so important because when we're taking a test, we inherently want to have a good outcome. We want to be socially desirable. We want to answer the way we think we should answer, but that's not real life. So this test by Dr. Drew, let me just say, it's very easy to manipulate. Okay. Extremely easy. So there are none of these inner constructs to make it a valid scale, number one. And number two, there's something about this test that it has all overt items. Here's what that means. There's overt items and there's covert items. An overt item is the construct is clear to a test taker. And a covert item is expected to be more resistant to faking than the overt items because the average person isn't able to pick up on, oh, this is trying to assess this, right? So a good psychological clinical assessment is going to have these internal constructs that prevent malingering, okay? This narcissistic personality inventory has zip, zilch, zero. And I am going to prove this right now. So I went ahead and took the test several different times, okay? First of all, I took the test, I got a 15. So with this test, it looks for different categories. So it's looking for authority, self-sufficiency, superiority, exhibitionism, exploitativeness, vanity, and entitlement. So all clinical assessment tools aren't just looking for one thing. They usually have these scales of other things that we're looking for, just as the MMPI has. And the cluster of questions, though, so I'm going to read you a couple examples and I'm going to see, what you think about this. So for example, if you're taking a test and you're trying to not look like a narcissist, okay? Question number 9, I am no better or worse than most people, or I think I am a special person. Now, if you're trying to not come off as a narcissistic douche, which one do you think you might choose? That's right. So it's like when you're reading these, it's not even hard. You don't even have to be clever or particularly intelligent to know what the item is trying to assess. Okay, that is my point. And in these other psychological tests, that is much more challenging, so you get a more authentic result. Now, this test, if you are authentically honest and very insightful and aware of your stuff and can truly answer honestly, does it have some validity? Sure. But it requires honesty, being forthcoming, and an ability to be so self-aware that you can truly answer that question, not in the way that you want to get the result, but in the way that is the true answer to the question, which takes morals and values. And, I just don't know if Tom has that. He may have taken this test and he may really be a 7, but I'm calling bullshit. It doesn't track and it doesn't align. So going back to, I tried taking this test several times. The first time, just to prove that it could be manipulated, okay? So the first time I got a 15. That was just my general score. Then I took it again, trying to get the lowest score possible, and I scored a 2. So that was me trying to manipulate it to get a lower score, okay? Normal psychological assessments, you shouldn't be able to do that. If I did this with the MMPI, which by the way, it would take forever because that test is very long and very taxing, I would not have been able to manipulate it. So this test was able to be manipulated like that. Boom, manipulate. Okay. Then I tried to manipulate to get a higher score, and I was able to score a 40, which shows that I understand what this test is trying to do. And I was able to answer all the questions, both in favor to get a high number and to get a low number. So that just kind of pokes a hole through this test right now. Now, the other thing that I find super interesting is that when you go, if you do go to OEB or Zero, it has written here, and I'm going to show this in the video for people watching it, but for people not watching it, I'll explain it. It prints out, so your results print out or just like show up on screen that the highest tested celebrity is Robin Quivers with a 34. Okay. So for those of you who are watching, it's insane. And here's why this is insane. And this to me completely took away all accountability of this test, is that could you imagine like a real clinical assessment tool being like, oh, Melissa Reich from Pennsylvania got a blah, 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 blah. Like what kind of assessment tool puts somebody's score for everybody to see? It just felt so gross to me. And here's the thing. So my husband is a huge Howard Stern fan. I can appreciate him, but I don't know. There's some issues sometimes that I have with Howard. But anyway, I am familiar with, so anybody who has watched Howard Stern, knows Robin Quivers. Dr. Drew has been talking about this test for years, and I never knew because he would always talk about Robin having the highest score, which is to me highly unethical because it was offensive to her. Nobody wants to feel like they're a huge narcissist. And, even though Howard, kind of said, well, she really is, I love her dearly, whatever. But the fact of the matter is, why are we advertising somebody's score? That is so unethical, and it's just super icky. And not only does he advertise her score, but at the end, when you like either go to look at your score or to print it, it has a link to now. It says, now see what your score means and how you compare to these celebrities in Dr. Drew's book, The Mirror Effect. And then it advertises the book. So to me, that just takes me out of it completely. It's gross. You're trying to sell something. I don't like it. I'm not a fan of this. It feels exploitative, and I just don't like it. I'm sorry. I just don't like it. Now, the other thing that I have to touch on is the research study that Dr. Drew mentioned and talked about. So this personality inventory was part of a greater research study. And Dr. Drew wrote a scientific article called Narcissism and Celebrity with a man named S. Mark Young. And, part of it being in the field of psychology, in certain fields, is that you do need to publish research. So here's what's interesting about this research. So Dr. Drew got this idea. He was hosting Loveline. He had access to all these celebrities. And to his credit, I think this is a very cool idea. He's like, I have access to all these celebrities. Why don't we do this study about narcissism and celebrity? So he claims that he was the only person to do this, and he's right. I did go ahead and look at and Google that and just did a quick search. You can look for scholarly articles, you can look for certain topics, and so I didn't do the most extensive search, but I did search, and so that is correct. Dr. Drew, it seems like he is the only person who has this this narcissism and celebrity. So I'll give him that. He had a platform, which, by the way, Loveline back in the day was legit amazing. Like, nobody was talking about sex. Nobody was talking about it in a way that was like sex positive or not shameful. So, Dr. Drew really, he was a trailblazer there, and I give him a lot of credit. And so he took this platform that he had, and he gave it to, I'm trying to look at how many celebrities he gave it to, because I apologize, but with the limited time I had, I read the study and I just can't find it right now. But so here's the finding of the study, which I find extremely interesting. So the narcissistic personality inventory was used for this study. So keep in mind, Robin Quivers and all these other people who scored these high scores, it was using this particular personality inventory that I'm talking about. Okay, so they used that, and what they found is that female celebrities were found to be significantly more narcissistic than their male counterparts. I don't know if there's misogyny in there. I don't know if that's just accurate, or, because here's my question. Well, are women more insightful and aware, and they're answering more realistically, like they're answering truly, and so now they're getting dubbed more narcissistic? Because as I just mentioned, it would be really easy for people to not answer these questions honestly because they don't want to look like narcissists. So that's, to me, like a flaw. And that was just something my brain thought about: is, are women just more honest and more aware? Bloop. Don't know. But that could be one possible confounding variable. Okay. Reality television personalities had the highest overall scores on the NPI, followed by comedians, actors, and musicians. So also, it found that celebrities may have had these narcissistic tendencies prior to entering the industry, because there was no relationship between the NPI score and years of experience in the industry. And I don't know how faulty that might be, but I kind of take this all with a grain of salt. Okay. So essentially, those were the findings of the study. I would if people want me to go into the study more, I'm happy to. I just don't want to bore people to death. So I can do another episode where I just completely go into that. But for anyone who's interested, I'm going to post the links to this. It's a Science Direct article. I'm going to post the links to that, and I'm going to post the links to the narcissism test. Now, here's the thing. Anybody who's going ahead and taking this test, take it with a grain of salt. Because there are things. So, for example, my score for authority was high, but that's because I'm very confident, I'm assertive, I'm capable, clear, I know what I'm doing, I know what I'm talking about, and that's self-confidence. But here it's reading as narcissistic. So what I'm saying is, if you take this test, don't take the results too seriously. Take it honestly, take it authentically if you want. And if you garner any insights from it that are helpful to you, great. If you don't, just, get rid of it and just throw the rest away. So let me see here. Oh, okay. So a couple points that I wanted to make are the problems with the test, is that when people are inherently narcissistic, they are not great at self-assessment. So if this test requires self-assessment, that's inherently problematic for people who are narcissistic. That's just, to me, a huge hole in this whole thing. I'm not a narcissist. I mean, I have narcissistic traits and tendencies, right? And so that's what this test is here to measure. We all do. Everybody does. But it is inherently problematic, if that makes sense, because people who struggle with narcissism just aren't really great at self-assessment. And the last thing is, I took the test based on what I feel like I've heard Tom, and this is not scientific at all. This was just me saying, based on what I feel like I've seen from Tom, based on what I've heard from Tom, based on behaviors and things, let me take the test based on how I think maybe he might really answer. And I came up with a score of 31. Okay, so this is not scientific at all. It cannot be used for any sort of evidence or whatever. I just did it because I thought it would be interesting. Tom's score of a 7 versus my score of a 31 based on things I've either seen him do or heard him talk about. So my point is that I think this test has some use if you're just using it to better yourself, if you have awareness and insight and you're able to truly answer honestly. Outside of that, I believe this test has very little value. YouTube interview as well, I felt like, Tom, he just like repeated the greatest hits, right? So the evidence to support what I'm saying is that he repeated the same thing over and over, that, Rachel wanted to hide things, and that, oh, wait, going back to, by the way, the first love at Space Camp Megan, he said that Rachel reminded him of Megan. Okay, so why is that important? Because he's consistently trying to make excuses for his behavior. Or, well, Rachel reminded me of Megan, and it reminded me of a time when things were good in my life. Well, what does that have to do with these women? That just has to do with your own ego. Also, Sandoval kept saying, well, Rachel or Ariana wanted to hide things, and Rachel came on to me, and, I loved the feeling because it reminded me of Megan. Okay, well, guess what? These are all things that are not going to match with a 7. They're just not. A 7 is someone who is incredibly insightful, aware, able to like say their stuff, have no hubris about it. And that's just not who Tom is. So I'm calling BS, and that's going to be that. So I hope you've enjoyed this portion, and any questions you have for me, please let me know. I'm happy to answer any and all questions. But for now, let us move on to Real Housewives of Beverly Hills. Okay. One of the most special things for me that I just wanted to share really quickly is on the day that Real Housewives of Beverly Hills, the premiere episode aired, 10/26, was my niece's 17th birthday, and my niece is incredibly special to me. I adore her. We're best friends. I just adore her. Okay. So it was her birthday. And then when I was driving, this was what was so wild to me. I went somewhere for my niece's birthday. I went to a bakery that I had never been to before. It was kind of far from my house. And when I left the bakery, I got a little lost. I was using my maps and stuff, but I just took a couple of wrong turns. And as I'm driving, I've been on this road that I was never on before. I see this giant, at first it looked like a hawk. And so here in Northeast PA, we really are blessed with the gift of nature and wildlife. We see bears, fox, hawks, snakes, everything. And I do love snakes. I think they get a bad rap. But anyway, we do get blessed with a lot of nature here. So that's very cool. But when I'm driving, I see in this, it looked huge. And all of a sudden, so I'm driving. And by the way, it was so close to my car. That's what made me notice it at first, because I was like, oh, is it sick or is there something wrong? And then I turn my head to look, and I see it is a bald eagle. I swear to you, I was like, it felt like one of the most special moments. And I was inherently aware of like, what is the universe trying to tell me right now? This is so special to me. I just thought about it all the way home, because I've never seen a bald eagle outside of a zoo, I don't think. I mean, maybe like, I don't know, maybe once that I forgot or something, but this was so special. And then all of a sudden, Real Housewives of Beverly Hills airs, and there's Eagle Woman. And I'm like, what is the universe trying to tell me? It was just it was too, I don't believe really in coincidence. I think personally, I think things happen for a reason. And I just felt, I just wanted to share that with you all because it was so special to me. And then to see Eagle Woman and just kind of like reinforcing this beautiful gift that I was given earlier that day. And, I love Eagle Woman. She is a spiritual healer, doctor of the soul. I feel like that's what I should call myself now, doctor of the soul. And maybe me seeing an eagle. Am I Eagle Woman too? I don't know. I don't know if that's appropriation or unkind, but I feel so wrapped up in this eagle thing. It's wild. So that was the first thing. Loved Eagle Woman. And I just felt like PK was, douchey to her, because that's just who PK is. PK is too cool for, healthy food and people who are different than him and people who, are spiritual. I just didn't like his attitude. But then again, I'm not a fan of PK. So there you go. But the things that I really want to get to are Erika, Dr. Jen Mann, and Kyle and Mauricio. I want to get to all of that because it was so wild and so fascinating to me. So let's start with Erika, because when Eagle Woman was doing the whatever they called it, the spiritual circle, and I know people are tired of that, but for me, I'm never tired of it, because those type of like, the sweat lodges, the drum circles, all that stuff, it just like gives you a different look into some of these housewives. And for me, I am obsessed with it. I could watch that forever. So I hope they never stop doing that, but I understand people are bored with it too. My thought is that Erika came in knowing that her friend is gone. So Lisa Rinna, she basically made her only ally. And now Rinna's gone. And by the way, I don't miss Rinna. I don't miss her at all. I thought the first episode was great. I didn't miss Lisa. And I'm honestly over Lisa, just like Lisa needed to get another storyline outside of Kyle and her siblings, because Lisa was riding that wave for a really long time, and to ride the wave on people's family dysfunction and pain just got really old for me, and it's just gross. But she was also the one who talked about Munchausen, care about how other people feel. I'm just not a Rinna fan. That Munchausen thing, it just really irritated me as someone with a chronic invisible illness. You look at me and you're like, oh, she's healthy, she looks great. But I'm not. And so I didn't like her. I just didn't like her approach. So my point is that Erika is going into the lion's den and she knows she has no friends. And to me, I'm going to be honest, I've never been an Erika fan, because I always have felt that there is something wildly inauthentic about Erika. Wildly inauthentic. She's in a relationship with this man who she claims to have this amazing relationship with. He's so supportive, blah, blah, blah. And now all of a sudden, he's the least supportive man on earth. He stole money and you knew nothing about it. All of these things. So it's like, there is just something wildly inauthentic about Erika Jayne. When she says she's a showman, she's right. She is a showman, and she is wildly inauthentic about it. One of the few honest things I believe that Erika said is that she's a showman, and she gave the people what they wanted when she was asked about which couple is next to divorce. And she talked about Dorit and PK. And here's the thing, Erika wasn't wrong, because the news broke about Dorit and PK separating, but then they walked back on that and they said, no, we've just had a tough year and we're trying to make it work, just like Mauricio and Kyle, right? So what I find is so fascinating is that Erika wasn't wrong, but that's not the point. She was just such a jerk about it. And Dorit, when she was like reading her for filth in the confessionals, it was amazing. And I loved it because, yeah, Dorit should be mad. It was not a cool thing to do. And then to sit in front of your friends, well, I don't know how truly friends they are, and to just like, here's the thing Erika said. She doubled down. She's like, I'm a showman. I gave those people what they wanted. Dorit, is your marriage strong? She still didn't apologize. She goes, it was a shady question. I gave a shady answer. We all hurt each other's feelings. Okay. So here's why I don't buy Erika's crying apology. One, I could tell she was acting. I have an internal detector for BS. I'm just gifted with it. And I can tell a lot of what Erika says and does is BS. She was like, I think she'd be a great actress because I think she's really good at it. But I just think she was like, doing the soliloquy about I was hurt and I was angry and I'm so sorry. It was just like so dramatic. And the reason why I don't buy it is because everything Erika said up to that apology was trying to usurp her own accountability and try to skirt responsibility. So those two things don't match to me. To cry and apologize, but only after you were like, well, no, it was a shady question. It just doesn't make sense to me. The other thing that irritates me about Erika is her saying that hormones made her lose weight. Okay. All right. Here's where I'm going to have to call serious bullshit. Okay. So as I just talked about, I'm a survivor of ovarian cancer. I have had not one, but 2 hysterectomies, which don't even get me started on that. I had a partial hysterectomy when I was 18, and then I had last year, I had another hysterectomy to remove the doctors wanted to keep my uterus and cervix in the event that I wanted to try to have a baby. And so it just ended up becoming hugely problematic. And last year I needed to get those taken out as well. So I had not one, but 2 hysterectomies. Okay. I have been perimenopausal since I was 18 years old. That's right. I was a menopausal teenager. There is no greater hell in the world, honey. I can tell you that. So what I can tell you as someone who's been on hormone replacement since I was 18 years old, and now I am on hormone replacement. I'm on estrogen because I am a little too young for menopause still. And plus the hot flashes are just, oh my God, they're awful. Anyone going through menopause or who's gone through, oh my gosh, I see you, I feel you. It is just brutal. But my point is that hormone replacement doesn't make you thin. It just doesn't. Hormone replacement can do a lot of things. It can mess with your mental health. It can, create weight gain and all these funky things, but weight loss is not typical. Now, are there some women who did experience that? For sure. I'm not saying this is 100% not likely, but it's the exception and not the rule. So what Erika is doing, which I do not appreciate, is she is using semantics to skirt her accountability or to skirt her, saying, yes, I'm on a semaglutide, I'm on peptides, I'm on whatever it is. So Ozempic and drugs like that are called semaglutides. And guess what? They are life-saving for people who need them. For diabetics, it's life-saving. For, weight loss, people who have an, extreme amount of weight to lose, it's life-saving medication. This medication has a purpose, and the purpose isn't to do medically assisted anorexia. I'm sorry. That's what so many of these celebrities use it for, which then creates shortages for people who do really need it. So I hope everyone is clear listening to this. There is no shade to people who are using it and who need it. That's what the medication's there for. But it irritates me when people like Erika, they're like, well, no, it wasn't that. It was hormones. Okay. So she was placed on something, which, by the way, people who are rich and who are famous, they get better medical treatment than I do. They just do. I never want to be famous, but that would be the only perk for me, is just like great medical treatment that I can't access now. So yeah, there are things that you can do, peptides and semaglutides and hormones and this and that, but you took medication to help lose weight. Okay. And that is just the end of it. So I don't want to beat this like a dead horse, but I feel that, I've kind of had it with Erika's, skirting responsibility, like when last year at the reunion, she kept telling Andy about the earrings, we're on appeal for legal reasons. We're on appeal for legal reasons. And it's like, yeah, you're on appeal because you want the earrings back. So the other thing that I found so fascinating from this episode is how Rob Minkoff, round of applause for Rob Minkoff, because he said something so profound that Erika's not responsible for stealing the money, but she is responsible for spending the money. Ooh, I felt that so deeply. And here's the thing. That is the honest to God's truth, is that you now know that the man that you were married to and the money that you spent was stolen. You now know that, okay? So you didn't know it, fine. Who cares? We're past that. But now you do. And up until last year, you were still trying to get those earrings back. I'm sorry. That tells you what we need to know. For me, if my husband did that and I bought anything in this house with stolen money, I would personally, I wouldn't be able to sleep at night, and I would liquidate everything that I don't care if I was homeless. I could not sleep at night having things in my home, wearing things on my body that I know was from stolen funds from people who needed it. I just couldn't imagine that. And so this leads to the empathy gate, right? So I have a lot of empathy. I couldn't possibly, sincerely, I would not be able to sleep at night. And Erika just doesn't seem to get that memo. Okay. So this whole scene with her and Dr. Jen Mann, who has been a therapist for many other shows, like I think she's done some stuff with Dr. Drew. I think she's done, I've definitely seen her before. And that always gives me pause too, like these celebrity therapists or doctors to the stars who just make their career out of being on TV. To me, they're reality stars as well. So I'm always just a little bit cautious. Also, LA or therapy in LA just seems to be bonkers. Like it just seems to be so different than what therapy should be for the rest of the country. I don't know. It just seems interesting. Being married to the least supportive person in the world. And it's like, okay, remember when she yelled at everyone for years about how amazing Tom was and how supportive he was? And it's like, well, she lived a whole lie, but then she screamed at people for calling her out on the truth, right? To me, that's just like, that's par for the course with Erika. And the one thing that was interesting is that Dr. Jen explained complicated grief, which, because like I've talked a lot about complicated grief, and so I didn't know if anyone caught that, which is just that, when they were talking about how when Tom dies, it'll still be grief for Erika, because like no matter what happened between them, no matter what he did, they were married for a long time. And, the point is that grief can be complicated and it can be hard. And, she was just trying to prepare Erika for that, which I thought was interesting. Now, the empathy gate. Erika, and I watched the scene so many times, Erika legitimately asked, how can I be a better friend? And how do I develop empathy? How do I get that is what she asked. And here's the thing. Garcelle said something really interesting, is that she doesn't know if Erika's like behavior or like what she's saying can be trusted. And I think that Garcelle has a good beat on this, because I have a good BS detector and I couldn't honestly tell if she was being serious, that she didn't understand what empathy is. But then it's like, well, what would have been the secondary gain? Like the scene didn't make her look good. Like on Watch What Happens Live, Kyle talked about the fact that scene did not make her look good. So I'm wondering what the secondary gain was for her about that. But the fact that she is either going to pretend that she doesn't know what empathy is, or that she doesn't, they're just both problematic. If you are at this point in your life and you're not acquainted with empathy, that is just really concerning. But based on Erika's behaviors, I buy it. I buy it. She certainly hasn't shown empathy like ever. Since she, like, let's not forget when she came on the scene, everyone said she was like an ice queen and an ice princess, and she's, all these things. And listen, yeah, Erika had a tough childhood, so she's guarded, and there's a lot of things that are legitimate. But I also just think that there's a part of her that she just like, she wears costumes, she wants to just like present as this one thing. And I just have the feeling that only really Erika knows who Erika is. So I just found that super interesting. I tend to believe, based on her behavior, she doesn't know what empathy is. So good luck to Erika and Dr. Mann on that. And the last thing I'm going to say about this before I move on to Kyle is that I find it interesting, and that the therapist didn't, if that were my client that I had been treating for a while, my question would have been, are you asking what empathy is? And let's talk about how this has never come up before, or what that means to you. Like, that is something that really could have been explored. Now, we saw a snippet of what's on TV. We don't know if they had more of a session outside of this, off TV, what have you. But that therapist, if she hasn't, she needs to really look into the missing link here with Erika, and process, like, how do you not know what empathy is at this point? And, blah, blah, blah. Okay, so now moving on to Kyle. Kyle and Mauricio, the whole situation with them was so wild to me. Watching the scene with them, So I'm going to share some things that I noticed and some thoughts that I have, because I also think people are being really hard on Kyle. The thing that frustrates me is how people on the internet like proclaim to know that she's dating Morgan Wade, or she's this or she's that. And it's like, we don't know her. Nobody knows her. Her friends know her. We don't know her. So I just think it's really wild. You can't make these statements on the internet like, oh, we know she's doing this for this. So what we know about Kyle, I've watched from season 1 episode 1 all the way now, which is season 13. Kyle is obsessed with her children. She is obsessed with giving her children the most love, support, and being the best mother that she can to her kids. Kyle would never put her kids through the ringer unless it was a real issue between her and Mauricio. I cannot, for the life of me, understand how anyone could have watched Housewives and thought that Kyle did this for like PR. So she went on Watch What Happens Live and she said that as well. And I'm just going to repeat, there is no way Kyle is doing this for PR. Number one. How do I know? The scene between her and Mauricio, you can't fake that kind of tension. You can't. I have seen it. I have felt it. I have experienced it in my private practice. And that is a couple who they are not connecting and they are struggling. So the thing that I felt the most interesting is that, well, Kyle has been sober for 7.5 months because she felt alcohol wasn't serving her physically or spiritually, and good for her, right? Her sister struggled with alcohol. I think there was some addiction in the family growing up. And so I think that we don't have to label ourselves anything. If alcohol is not serving you, that's a great reason to give it up. So bravo for Kyle. I think that, Kyle said when Mauricio didn't know how many tattoos she had, the tension was so palpable. And Kyle said it's a big symptom of not spending time together. Years ago, he would have noticed a freckle on my body. And so here's one thing that I can tell people. So I have been in a relationship with my husband since I was 21 years old, and I'm now going to be 43. Okay. When you are with someone for a decades long relationship, and since you were young, your relationship will go through many metamorphoses. And there are good years and sometimes there are bad years. That is just how it is. So I think sometimes people, and this is no shade, but sometimes people do not understand what it means to maintain a decades long marriage and relationship. It is hard work. It's beautiful, it's amazing, but it is also very hard. And both you and your partner have to be incredibly committed, not only to each other, but to the process of becoming a better person. And I got very lucky that I have a partner we both work on ourselves individually and as a couple. And, we really prioritize each other. And I think that sometimes when people have kids, especially with Kyle, I think that the relationship, she didn't rock the boat, right? Because the most important thing that Kyle said in this episode is that she did everything her mom told her to do. And then she was the best mom that she could be. And she was a role model to her kids. And now she doesn't want anybody telling her what to do. This woman has spent her entire life taking care of her siblings, pleasing her mother, and then when her mother died, taking care of her siblings to please her mother in death, which she'll never stop doing because she promised her mother that she would, and then having kids of her own and just being the greatest mom and parent that she could be to those kids. And guess what? Now those kids are grown. And so what happens is with couples who haven't prioritized their relationship or over focus on other things, sometimes the kids leave and they kind of look at each other and they're like, wait, where did our relationship go? And it with Kyle and Mauricio, to me, it just goes to show how that can happen with people who truly love each other. Because with Kyle and Mauricio, there is real love there. There is real love and adoration. They've built a family together. But the people that they were when they got married and the people that they are now are just vastly different people. And now that their kids are out of the house, I think Kyle is just really coming to an understanding of Kyle's never just taking care of Kyle. Never. I have watched season 1, episode 1 to now, and I'm telling you, it was either Kyle taking care of her kids, her sisters, Mauricio, whatever. Kyle's never taken care of Kyle. And guess what? Sister's tired, and now she wants to take care of herself, and she doesn't want to have to answer to anybody. And I totally get that, and I totally respect it. Kyle is, for the first time in her life, paying attention to what she wants and what she needs. And when Mauricio was trying to, do the I will not allow that and blah, blah, blah. Well, A, it is controlling. But B, the other thing that I am aware of that is in the Jewish religion, tattoos are really taboo. And so I can't help but wonder if there's that component to it before, we kind of troll Mauricio too hard. That may be a piece of it for him. That he wasn't able to express. But either way, we're not telling women what to do with their bodies anymore. I'm not sure if he got that memo, but I'm sure he got it now. That's just not for us to do. Parents, spouses, let's just not tell people what to do with their bodies. Now, if we have concern about something that they're doing with their body, sure, let's raise that concern. But the way that Mauricio, it just felt really controlling, and it just felt like he was scared because he could sense that Kyle was different. I think Mauricio and Kyle's marriage really worked well because Kyle was always the good wife, the good mother, the good sister. And when she took a step out of that role, it's not uncommon for a spouse to say, I don't like you outside of that role. I miss the Kyle who was always trying to please me, who would listen if I said, please don't do this. I think that he's struggling a little bit with that too, in fairness to him. That's just my opinion. Awareness of is that, Kyle had a lot of painful times with her sisters, the whole thing that happened with Kathy Hilton last season. And then we know that they famously, it took a long time to make up. So she was painful times with her sister. She was let down by her friends, feeling disconnected from her husband. She needed an outlet, which was exercise. And I believe this is why Kyle gets so mad that people keep saying she's using Ozempic or semaglutide, because I think Kyle feels very invalidated by the world. When we work really hard for something and we do the work ourselves, for people to just say, oh, you took Ozempic, I think it's highly offensive to her. I don't think Kyle took anything to assist her losing weight. I think she had a lot of grief and trauma that she put into a positive coping mechanism, right? There's positive coping ways to cope and there's negative ways to cope, and exercising can be a really positive one. So that's my take on that. I also think that, the interesting thing between Kyle and Mauricio is that maintaining relationships, going back to talking about long-term relationships, maintaining relationships requires accepting all parts of ourselves, but also all parts of our partner. We don't like it, but we must accept it because our partners, and we all have what I would call character defects, personality traits that maybe aren't so great. We all have those, but to truly love yourself and to truly love your partner, you have to accept the good and the bad parts, for lack of a better term. And I just don't think Mauricio wants to accept these parts of her, which is really shitty. It's like, so you're only going to accept her and love her if she has these good parts. Like I think part of the reason, for example, my husband and I are so successful is we do accept those parts of each other, and we're gentle with each other when those parts rear their ugly heads. And that's the best we can do. And it just seems like Mauricio's not able to do that, which I think is really crappy. And I think, at the end of the day, Mauricio's hand-holding with his Dancing with the Stars partner, I think it was passive-aggressive. I think he is pissed off that Kyle is not able to be contained and she's not following the good Kyle rules. And I think it was passive-aggressive. And I think that's really shitty because I think he owes her more than that after all these years of marriage. So that's just my take on that. Now, the last two things that I'm going to talk about, because my God, this podcast is long, and thank you for hanging in there with me. So Dorit, the thing that I want to say is that I believe that, PK was just not there for her after the whole robbery. And here's what everyone keeps saying, that, PK staged the robbery. Okay, let me tell you something. What I saw from Dorit last season, she's not that good of an actress. And I could tell that she really was severely traumatized and in fear for her life. So here, we don't know that PK did that. I mean, that's a wild accusation, number one. But number two, if it was somehow planned or she knew about, she would not have reacted the way that she did. I can tell Dorit is traumatized. And here's also how I can tell that the trauma is real. So what happens is PK goes to London and is just completely unsupportive, just emotionally alienates PK or Dorit because she's not the perfect housewife. She's having issues. And what happens in relationships is when partners stop meeting needs due to their own issues, it's emotional alienation. And when the one thing that I truly believe leads to divorce and the death of a couple is when couples stop talking. When couples stop talking, when communication ceases, it strangles the relationship. And so what I think that I'm seeing is that, Dorit said, I wish something big happened, like he cheated, but it wasn't that. And it's like, her perspective on this is so wild. It's like emotional alienation is literally the worst thing you can do to a partner, and it causes the death of a relationship. So I think her perspective on it is weird. Like, sometimes people feel like, well, someone needs to do something really egregious, but this is egregious. You can't just like withhold your love and support because he feels her PTSD is obnoxious. Oh my God, I can't wait till that episode airs. I'm going to talk a lot about that. So that's kind of what I think is going on there. Now, the last thing that I want to address is that the Morgan Wade thing and Kyle, here's what I'm going to say about this. Whether she's in a relationship with Morgan Wade or not, what is frustrating to me is that over focusing on that, like, yes, would it be salacious, for her and Mauricio to separate and then for Kyle to be in another relationship? Sure, of course. That would be shocking to people and salacious. But what I don't like is it's more salacious somehow because Morgan's a woman. And so truly, and I think that most people don't realize this, but what it is, it's fetishizing queer culture. And there's an underlying bit of homophobia in that, which is like, it doesn't matter if she's dating a female or a male. It's wild and it's salacious, but like, the over fixation on it because Morgan is a female and is gay, I find it fetishizing queer culture, and I'm just not here for it. So Kyle says that her and Morgan are friends, and guess what? That is all that we can know for now, and it shouldn't matter. To me, it doesn't matter if they're dating or if they're not. I hope Kyle's happy. I hope Mauricio's happy. And I just don't like the overfocus on it because of that reason. Okay. So please don't at me. That's just how I feel. And then the last two bits of information are, I don't like on Watch What Happens Live doing the shot ski with sober people. Don't do that. Stop doing it. We don't need it. To me, that's obnoxious. Kyle is sober, and she asked right before they did the shot ski, she's like, this is just water, right? And Andy has done this multiple times with, so here's my solution. Don't have sober celebs on when you're doing a shot ski night. Just don't. There's no reason to do it because here's why it aggravates me. Recovery, for people like, again, Matthew Perry is so precious and so important. And even the behavior of doing something like that can trigger something in people who are sober. And so Kyle just abstained from alcohol. We don't know if she has an issue or how she identified it. But at the same time, I just don't like it. It just seems really gross to me. So thank you so much for hanging in for this super extended episode of Your Bitch Therapist podcast. I appreciate you all very much. As always, please let's remember to be the light in the world we want to see and take care of ourselves and each other now more than ever. Disclaimer. Posts are not intended to diagnose, treat, or provide medical advice. Your RHOBH therapist is for entertainment and informational purposes only. The podcast, my opinions, and posts are my own and not associated with past or present employers, any organizations, Bravo TV, Greyheart Productions, or any other television network. The information in YBT podcast and on its social media is provided for general informational purposes only and is not intended to diagnose or treat. Please do not act or refrain from acting based on anything you read, see, or hear on YBT podcast or associated social media. Communicating with YBT via email and or social media does not form a therapeutic alliance. Melissa, operator of YBT, is unable to provide any therapeutic advice, treatment, or feedback.